You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody. Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail dream. Have you ever dreamt of hiking the AT? Bruce Matson did, so we're going to follow him every step of the way. Hi everybody, and thanks so much for still being with us on Bruce's epic journey in Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail dream, sponsored by Trailtopia Adventure Foods. When I called up with him on Friday, it was in the Bigelows, another of the great sections of mountains in Maine. He'd stopped for lunch with his buddy G-Bolt, and, as you'll hear, the three amigos had already been reduced by one. When you first hear him, it's clear that he had decided to try and do the interview while chomping on food. He soon stops though. Oh, and by the way, do you remember, I don't know, maybe back in the Smokies, when Bruce was telling us that on a difficulty scale of 1 to 10, he'd expected the AT to be a 7 and had revised it upwards to a 7.5. Well, he's had a bit of an upward reassessment on that, which you're going to hear at the end of our chat. Still, before Bruce chomps on his food, why don't we all have a snack? How about those days when you struggle through the morning, probably got 10 miles under your belt, and breakfast is a distant memory. It's lunchtime and, yeah, you could always have your full Snickers of the day for yet another sugar rush. But sitting there in an empty shelter, protected from the bitter wind, I'm sure you'd really rather have Trailtopia's beef-flavoured ramen noodles with green beans, corn and mushrooms. D-flippin'-licious. And if you need to go without the gluten, all of Trailtopia's ramen noodle lunches and light dinners are available gluten-free. Try Trailtopia Adventure Food, the best of home cooking away from home. We're probably just 2, perhaps 3 episodes from the end of his journey, and I, for one, am going to miss the old boy. He's really given me an education in how to approach the trail in an effort to give yourself the maximum possibility of success on it. Having said that, of course, my guess is that I'll be just as unprepared when I start again next March as I was when I did the trail for the first time in 2014. Some of us just aren't well organised. But I hope you've all gleaned stuff from Bruce's journey that may have made you rethink your own approach to a thru hike. So let's have a listen. Here's Bruce.
Yes, sir.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Good. Now, we actually just had a phone call, Bruce and I, so I do know that he's on Is it South Peak of in the Bigelows?
Yeah, technically South Horn, and we were trying to figure out the difference between a peak and a horn.
All right.
Because there's a horn in the saddlebacks, and we think, but we're not sure, that the difference is a peak has to be over 4,000 feet.
All right. Oh, I hadn't even thought about that. So how's it gone last couple of days? I know you passed 2,000 miles yesterday.
Yeah, we passed 2 days ago. We passed the mark for less than 200 miles to go.
Wow.
Yesterday we passed 2,000 miles. We went into Stratton for a little resupply. Had a good, Nero there, resupply. And I was pretty down about having to climb these Bigelows. They were predicting 70% chance of thunderstorms.
Right.
And but we headed out this morning on a clear day. And the trail has been magnificent. It's good quality, good grade, switchbacks, stairs, and we've already climbed 2 peaks today. And it's magnificent. It's beautiful, clear, and if the rain's coming, it won't be for quite some time. So things are really good. My enthusiasm has turned around, and
good.
I'm ready for the home stretch.
Do you feel like it's drawing you in? Can you feel the pull of Katahdin? I certainly could by now.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm hiking with G-Bolt, and we've been very, he kind of feels like I do. We got here a long time, got to finish, and we've kind of attacked Maine in these segments, 3 days, 4 days, plan, complete, plan, complete, and it's worked really well for us. So I think we're in a good place. We've got 3, maybe 3.5 days to get to Caratunk. It all depends on how well we do today.
Right.
And once we get to Caratunk, we get 3 days to Monson. So we've kind of been trying to at least get across to Kennebec before we really start thinking about the finish line.
Really? I'd be thinking of it for about 300 miles by now. Have you seen Katahdin yet? I think it's where you are actually, South Peak. No, South Horn. And then I remember I did a video and I said I thought it was Bighorn or something like that. And I think the one you're going over next, there's apparently, if it's a clear day, you should be able to see Washington to the south and Katahdin to the north.
Yeah, they told us that about Saddleback. We had a miserable day going up Saddleback, so we didn't see a thing. But today's a good day, but it's not that kind of clear day where I think we would see that far. So I don't think we're going to see Katahdin just yet.
So it's just the two of you now? What happened to the other guy? Was it Recon?
Yeah, Recon. We're mourning the loss of our hiking buddy. Recon spent a long time with G-Bolt coming up from the south.
Right.
We went into Maine together, and in the Wildcats, he had a fall, and there was a kind of a quirky in the sense that he fell straight. This is going to sound awful, and it is awful. He fell straight into a stump that was,
wow.
The width of a Gatorade bottle or something.
Yeah.
So it's lucky it almost didn't pierce him, and it hit him in the ribs. And I think he was a lot tougher and braver than me, and put up with some pain for 3, 4, 5 days. And it finally, there was swelling, and I think the pain was bad enough that when we got into Andover, he decided he had to get off the trail. So
wow.
I know G-Bolt is really missing him, and I miss him. Even though we only were together 4 or 5 days, he's a great guy, and would love to have him with us. But we're hoping he's healing well.
So has he come up from Georgia? Yes,
he did. Tough guy though. He got a stress fracture in Pennsylvania, so he missed some of Pennsylvania, and he missed New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont. So he had, I think, what did he go, 477 miles? I think he had almost 500 miles that he was going to have to make up.
Right.
But we still miss him, and I'm still sad when anyone has to get off the trail.
Yeah. Have you had any more falls, or are they not been too bad?
I've had some falls. Actually, I had one fall at Saddleback, which was kind of silly because coming off the Horn, you got Saddleback, the Horn, Saddleback Junior. Saddleback was actually, even though we had miserable weather, was not a bad hike in terms of the trail quality, the steepness, the challenge. They're all hard, as you know. But coming off the Horn was just horrendous in terms of how vertical and steep it was going down. And not just vertical and steep, but the jumble of rock that didn't give you good foot options. But I didn't fall there. I actually fell at the top of Saddleback Junior, where it was flat. And it was typical. Most of us recognize that when we slip and when we fall, half the time or more often, it's not necessarily because of the severity of the challenge of whatever you're trying to do, but it's because we've taken our eye off the ball. We've stopped thinking about that step, and we're thinking about the next step, or we've just decided to look up at a view or a sign, and that's when it hits you. There's so many ways to slip and fall out here. And I was pretty much on the top of Saddleback Junior, and I was just turning to sort of head down, and I put my foot, I think I was looking up to see where the trail was going down, and I put my foot on, an angled rock, and it slipped. I fell forward, sort of straight on my face.
Wow. Fortunately,
my poles, my hands sort of caught me, but I did hit my chest into a rock, and I did bruise my a rib or something. But and it hurt when I laughed. It hurt when I talked. But it's already that was 2 days ago. It's already feeling better. So unlike Recon, I don't think mine was very severe, thankfully. And so I had that fall. As you know, one thing Southern Maine is known for is rocks and roots.
Yes. And
we've had enough rain that we have rocks, roots, mud, and water everywhere, and almost no place to step other than rock, roots, mud, and water. And Yesterday was, I have to admit, a frustrating day for me because I got tired of the rocks and roots and mud and water. And when you're jumping around and taking odd length steps, short steps, long steps, left steps, right steps, trying to dance around rocks and roots and not just go headlong into these vats of black mud, you just take some weird steps.
Yes.
And you don't necessarily know exactly how slippery something is or not.
I'm sure this will give you a real appreciation of the importance of foot placement, isn't it? And pole placement. The times you could fall over. I mean, I saved myself tons of times, but I still fell over tons of times as well. So, every single step, you really have got to pay attention to what you're doing, don't you?
Yep. So I had one fall, one slip where I just kind of went careening into the vegetation. I didn't even fall, but because the vegetation held me up. And I had another, just sort of slip on the side and went down on my hip, but I went down on some, just some mud and moss and scrub. So those weren't, but I probably fell, 3 times yesterday on minor falls. But yeah, I'm actually sort of lost count because I was doing pretty well keeping count, but I'm sure I'm over 20, probably close to 25 falls on the trip so far.
I think, it's partly because it does get harder as time goes on, obviously. Certainly New Hampshire and Maine are much more difficult than the other states. But I think it's also a matter of tiredness as well. You just get tired, don't you? You get beat up and you lose attention and your weakness, your sort of weakness starts to show sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. And that was true yesterday. I was just kind of tired and frustrated. Part of it, this goes back to, and I know I've stressed this over and over again, and I really believe it to be true, is this whole approach, your mental approach to these things. What's your expectations? Are you prepared for something? Today's a good example. I was prepared for the toughest, miserable day. I didn't want to have to climb these peaks. The weather was supposed to turn bad.
Right.
But I'm determined to get over these mountains. Everyone tells us after the Bigelows, you've conquered most of the tough stuff in Maine.
Yes.
And so I've had this really mentally prepared today for tough. Didn't turn out to be tough. Maybe it didn't turn out to be tough because of that mental state. And I'm having a great day.
That's great.
Yesterday when I fell a bunch of times, we had a friend who came through here a couple of days before us, told us once you got past the last Crocker, it was this pine needle path for miles where you would just cruise down to the road. And after 2 miles of step up, mud, rock, we were like, where's this pine needle path? And I do think part of my frustration was I had this expectation of a smooth, easy afternoon, and it turned into be not that way. So it's that constant mental battle about expectations and reality, and are you ready for it or you're not ready for it? And maybe I'm more like that than some, but it has a big impact on sort of my happiness every day if I understand what the challenge is and I don't have any surprises. If you go back to sort of that banana pudding moment we talked about, a lot of that was distress caused by lack of anticipation about the severity of the climbs in the middle of New York.
Yeah. Well, you went through the hut system in New Hampshire, and it's different in Maine. I'm just trying to think, are there shelters in Maine? I'm just trying to think. I don't recall that many shelters.
Yeah, they like to call them lean-tos. They're really no different than the shelters we're used to. Some are better than others.
That's right.
Some have caretakers.
All right. That's right.
But I would say, as a general matter, they're really no different than we've seen throughout the trail. We just came through Horns Pond, a beautiful pond and a beautiful lean-to area. And maybe Maine's a little more organized in terms of when you walk into the shelter area, they often have a map. The map tells you where the tenting areas are or the tenting platforms are.
That's right, yes.
Tell you where the privy is. Some have caretakers, some of them don't. But I wouldn't say that it doesn't feel materially different, unlike like an AMC hut in the White Mountains, which is, of course, is like almost a full service hut.
Yeah. Have you found yourself camping away from the shelters, though? Especially if there's 2 of you now, it's easier to then find a spot to just stealth camp. Have you done much of that recently?
Yeah, we've done both. I think we both like shelter life because there's usually a water source, usually a privy, and there's usually people to share your experiences with. So I think G-Bolt and I both like the shelter spots, but we also are happy and open to stealthing, and we've done that.
Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about sort of going through the 100-mile wilderness and sort of using that time as sort of a time to really sort of reflect on the whole journey and the trip. And we think we might, do more of that to give us those more secluded moments. And everyone tells us there's lots of those opportunities in the 100-mile wilderness.
Yeah, one of our guests on the Mighty Blue Show, Bethany Varner, she got through the 100-mile wilderness in 69 hours. That's ridiculous.
Is that a challenge?
No, right. I'd love you to take it on, and good luck with that. 69 hours she got through it, which is just ridiculous, but absolutely amazing.
Won't be me. I hope I get through in 69 days.
Did you? You said you've fallen over a few times. Have you actually drawn blood yet? Have you actually had not serious injuries, but bad cuts at all? Because I had a few of those.
I had one on the second day of the trip. Went down to my my left arm, which drew a little bit of blood, not too much. I really haven't drawn much blood. You won't be surprised by this. One day I looked down and I had 3 cuts bleeding, and they all happened at the same time. We were going by one of these alpine bogs, and you could literally step down to your waist, and they're so soft and boggy.
Yes.
And so someone had sort of created a bypass, or you went really close to the edge of the vegetation. You try to tiptoe around the bog, and while I was trying to stay dry, you're brushing up against the vegetation, which you'll remember you do all the time.
Yes.
But this place, I was rubbing up against a tree that was more substantial, and people had snapped off a bunch of branches. And all of a sudden I realized almost simultaneously 3 branches were cutting into my wrist and my arm. But they're superficial. But you asked if I drew blood, and there was blood, a little bit of blood there. But no, I haven't had any other than, I think we talked about it in the Shenandoahs. I was ducking under a tree, and when I ducked under it, there was a branch that I didn't see, and I drove my head right into that branch. And I drew a little blood at the top of my head then.
Well, look, I've got a question, and I'm sort of going to slightly change it, I think. Well, I'm going to ask it, and it's one of those, if you were this sort of person. It's from a guy called Patrick Sackrider, and I'll read it out first before you answer it. It says, talking about the younger hikers who hike the trail, and then he as a hiker was a little bit older and so on. He says that it seems like you have a plan, and he was curious about a couple of things. He said, the success you've had, talking about me actually, and RTK as well in your life, how do you feel that your lives would have been impacted had you set out at 20 years of age instead of 60 years of age? I don't know whether you ever think about that at all, because I did. I wondered how my life, the trajectory of my life may have changed, whether I was so focused on career or not. And said, do you think you would still have pursued all the glories of a professional career and families and friends and relationships? Have you thought back and tried to imagine the 20-year-old Bruce on a trail and how you may have coped with it then?
It's a really good question, a really interesting question. I can't say I've really had that thought. First of all, I don't think that you could do this hike and not somehow change your life. It's going to change you at some level.
Sure.
And we can talk about that someday, about how it's impacting me.
Yeah.
So at one level, there's no question that if I did it in my 20s, it would have affected me. I don't know. It's kind of like a chicken or egg sort of thing. I don't know that you really can appreciate some of the things in life about we recognize. I think a lot of us recognize that at this stage of life, time is more valuable than money. Family and relationships are more valuable than prestige or glory or accomplishment in professional life or money. But I don't think as a 22, 24, 25-year-old, I would have had the hike change me in terms of the sort of uber self-reliance, go conquer the world attitude that I think I had as a young guy. Because it's almost only after you've done it and you realize that it doesn't pay the dividends you think it's going to pay. So, I I always say I'm the most blessed person in the world. I've got the best family. I've had the best opportunities. I don't want to look back and really relive it. Obviously, there are things I wish I had done better, but for me to be where I am in life, I think I'm the most blessed person in the world. So, I don't know that it would have changed me if I had hiked. A lot of these things that you learn to appreciate, I think you only can appreciate when you've experienced the things you think were going to pay dividends or kind of love you back, like your money or your success.
Well, you've expressed that far more articulately than I could express it to myself. What I was thinking was that the age in which I did it, I just fell into what I think was probably the right age for me to do it. I'd earned a lot of money in my life and lost a lot of money in my life with the various divorces and so on. But, I think it was a good age for me to get to it. I think life is so much about timing. I think when I was 8, I remember back to when I was 20 thinking I just had to earn as much money as possible. I left school at 18 and I was desperate to get a job and earn money and so on. I was really greedy, I guess, to try to get things. And I think the trail taught me so many things as a 61-year-old that I may not have appreciated as a 20-year-old. Maybe I would have done still, but I think the more I thought about it, I'm glad I did it when I did, and I'm still glad I had the life I had. But I think I appreciated so much more about it than I personally would have done at 20. But I would love to know other people's view on that if they ever want to write in and tell us how they think it's changed them as a 20-year-old. But that was an interesting question, I thought.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
So what's coming up now then? What's next for you? No, I mean, not now. I mean, literally the next couple of days. I haven't got the map in front of me again. So where have you got to hike next?
So we've got to finish the Bigelows hopefully today, and we should. It's nice weather, and then we're going to, we don't have too much substantial peaks or anything, so. The next few days will be fairly modest hiking, best we can tell, with us kind of cruising into, you'll remember, cruising into the Kennebec River. Yes. And the canoe crossing at Caratunk.
Have you checked the timing of that, by the way? Because it's only open for a certain period of time.
Yeah, we've been looking at that, right. And we decided we needed to get through today to figure out if we were going to rush the third day to catch the 1 or 2 o'clock canoe, because it ends at 2.
Yeah.
Or whether we should just kind of hole up short of town. I think there's a shelter 4 miles short of the river, and then roll in there early and be in town at 10 mid-morning and have kind of a long Nero.
That's what we did.
We're not really, whether we summit on the first or the second or the third is really not all that critical. So we were going to just play out the day today and see where we ended up, and then after we did that, we would see whether or not we could get to the river on the third day, or whether we just go ahead and do it on the fourth day. So either way, we can. If we get there on the third day, we're still going to have a Nero, because you got to get in the canoe by 2.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
so,
right.
But today was the critical day because of the severity of the hiking and the question mark about the weather. Weather's been great, and if we get a 15-mile day in today, we'll probably get to Caratunk on the third day rather than the fourth day.
It's funny, actually. Then when you eventually get to Monson, you think you're virtually there, and you are virtually there. You've got the 100-mile wilderness and so on. Have you thought about a strategy for the 100-mile wilderness? Are you going to try to slack pack at all? Are you going to leave food, or are you going to think about that when you get to Monson?
No, actually, I have thought about it, and I've talked to G-Bolt about that, and I think we're like-minded about that. We both are going to plan to have 6 or 7 days of food when we leave. It'll be a heavy pack, but there's something elegant about the design, you want to call it that, the design of the trail, because it's another reason I wouldn't want a southbound.
Yes.
But after all this time and all this effort to get here, I think it's wonderful that you can head into the 100-mile wilderness, turn off your technology because you really can't use it very effectively, and have this time where you're not interrupted by any more town stops. You're not really interrupted by crossing roads. and to be able to reflect on what you've just done for the last 6 months, and hopefully, make it as meaningful as possible as you finish. Take your time at these ponds and go swimming and enjoy the time, and realize that it's a chance of a lifetime. It's not going to ever be repeated, and just use that time in almost a quiet, contemplative, but also a fun way to look back on the whole trip. And then you get to Birches, you get to Baxter, and you get this sort of punctuation point at the end of the journey, which is, of course, the climb up Katahdin. So we actually have thought about it, I think, a fair bit. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. We had friends who told us, well, go light the first couple days, because the first couple days 100-mile wilderness are a little tougher. Then you can get a food cache or a food delivery brought to you. Yeah. And then 3 days later, you can get another food delivery brought to you. And, everyone should hike their own hike, and everyone should do whatever they want to do. But for G-Bolt and me, the idea of having food brought out there kind of interrupts this whole idea of this would be the longest time of carrying food and being out in the wilderness, so to speak, uninterrupted in the whole trip. You don't, as you rarely are out there for more than 3 or 4 days without some stop, some town visit. So that is what we've talked about. That is what, thankfully, we're both like-minded about what we want to do and achieve. And that's the plan.
I slack-packed the first 4 days of 100-mile wilderness. I was back in Monson every night for 3 nights. It was fantastic.
I didn't know you could do that.
Oh yeah, we found a guy in Monson. To be fair, at the end, at the last day, it was about a 2-hour drive back out there again. But that was one of those things. But we were just exhausted by then. But you say about you going through the 100-mile wilderness, you reflect upon it and how it's a once in a lifetime thing. Well, I thought that as well. But then look at me, I'm planning to go again next year. So who knows, really.
You never know. Every time I finished the marathon, I said, I'm never going to do that again. And then for some reason, 2 weeks later, the romance and the challenge of running 26 miles sort of crept back in, and I ended up doing a few more. And but that said, people have asked me, I've said, no, I'm through hiking. I don't think I'm going to do another through hike. So we'll see. I just don't think, and I don't want this to sound the wrong way. I don't think, unless you're out here, you really understand how hard it is. And this has been really hard. I always said it would be the hardest thing I'd ever done, and it certainly has been that. I told you I thought it would be like a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10. Yeah. Later in the trip, I told you, well, it's probably an 8. Yeah. Now that I'm sort of knocking at the door, and a scale of 1 to 10, it's 11 or 12.
Oh, really? Now, it's interesting. I didn't realize you thought that. Wow. I thought you might move it up to 8 or an 8.5 or a 9, but you say it's off the charts. Yeah, it is tough. There's no question about it. And, you're going to look back and you're going to realize how tough it was. You already realized you're going to know how tough it was. And you're right. Nobody's ever really going to know how tough it is, but you do. And you're going to look back at it with such pride, joy, there's so much stuff you're going to look back on. And I'm really interested in us having a follow-up after you've finished, when you've had a chance to reflect on it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then we can talk about your reflections, which I think will be really fascinating for the show. Okay, buddy. Well, look, good to talk to you. And, I just keep going on. And we've only got a couple of more episodes. So I'm looking forward to hearing how you go next time. All right?
All right. Very good.
Take it easy.
Be well, Steve. Keep in touch.
Take it easy. Bye.
All right, take care. Bye.
So he's gone from a 7.5 to an 11 or 12. I'm kind of glad, actually. Several people have said that Bruce has made it sound so easy. So I'm glad he pointed out how difficult it all really is. It's a war of attrition on your body, and while it makes you physically stronger in your legs, it wears down on you eventually, especially at our age. Great question from Patrick Sackrider, by the way, about the differences in a 20-year-old's hike and a 60-year-old's. I guess the bottom line is that it is neither too early nor too late to hike the AT. Just know that whenever you get to do it, it will be both the challenge and the experience of your life. Don't forget to send me your address, Patrick, so that you can get your 2 Trailtopia bags of yumminess. Poor old Recon, eh? I know he'd had to miss out on quite a bit of the trail because of his previous injury, But quitting in Maine must be especially hard when you can almost smell Katahdin. Very sad for him and for Bruce and G-Bolt. So now Bruce and G-Bolt are going to use the 100-mile wilderness to reflect upon what they've done. I can tell you, there's going to be some emotion at that point. I remember it very well. Bruce and I will see you next week.